Last Christmas Eve, my parents changed the locks while I was out buying their gifts. I stood on the porch for 3 hours in a snowstorm, watching our family celebrate through the window, until I found my grandmother's final letter naming me the sole trustee of a $400 million holding company they never knew existed. My name is Alara Vance. For 26 years, I was the daughter my parents pretended they never had. That letter, written in my grandmother's shaky cursive just days before she died, didn't just reveal a fortune. It revealed that the woman they'd cast aside as worthless was now the sole legal gatekeeper to everything they'd ever wanted. And I had one night, alone in the cold, to decide what to do with that power. To understand why my grandmother did what she did, you need to understand the Vance family hierarchy. My brother Lucas was the heir. I was the spare part. And my grandmother, Eleanor Vance, was the silent architect watching it all from her estate in Newport. I was born 7 years after Lucas, a surprise that disrupted my parents' carefully curated image. My father, Richard, built a commercial real estate firm on family connections and aggressive charm. My mother, Celeste, was the social curator, her value measured by the parties she could access and the gossip she could control. Lucas was their prototype, captain of the lacrosse team, legacy admission to Brown, a carbon copy of my father's ambition with my mother's social grace. And then there was me. Quiet, a reader, more interested in the structural engineering of bridges than the social engineering of country club politics. My first memory of understanding my place was at age 6. Lucas got a miniature Porsche pedal car for his birthday. I got a doll. I looked at my grandmother who was visiting. She didn't smile. She just watched me, her eyes sharp behind her glasses, and gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. "Don't cry," it said. "Not here, not in front of them." Grandma Eleanor was different. She was my father's mother, a woman who'd taken the Vance family timber fortune in the 1960s and quietly multiplied it tenfold through what she called quiet investments. She never raised her voice. She never gave unsolicited advice. But she saw everything. She started inviting me to Newport for 2 weeks every summer, just me, not Lucas. Those summers were my salvation. We didn't shop or do tea parties. She'd take me to the docks and explain how shipping container logistics built modern trade. She'd have her lawyer, a stern man named Mr. Aldridge, give me simplified versions of trust documents and ask me to find the clause that controlled the disbursements. It was a game, she said, the most important game in the world. When I was 14, I made the mistake of telling my parents I wanted to study structural engineering. We were at dinner in our Greenwich dining room. My father put his fork down. "That's a tradesman's career, Alara. We don't get our hands dirty." My mother patted my hand. "You'll marry well, you don't need a degree for that." That weekend at Grandma's, I was furious. I ranted about their narrow-mindedness. Grandma Eleanor listened, sipping her sherry. Then she said, "Never show them your ambition. They will only see it as a threat. Nourish it here with me." She set up a separate bank account for me that day, funded with dividends from a minor trust. My education fund, she called it. My parents never knew. Fracture became a canyon when I turned 18. Lucas was given a vice president title at my father's firm, a corner office, and a trust fund worth $5 million to learn investing. My gift was a deadline. I was to enroll in the liberal arts program at the college they'd chosen, find a suitable husband by graduation, or my allowance would be cut off. I looked at Grandma Eleanor across the room. She gave me a single, slow blink. That night, I used the money from the secret account. I applied to one school only, MIT, for civil engineering. I was accepted. When I showed my parents the letter, my father tore it in half. He said, "You are not a Vance if you choose to be a laborer." That was the first time he disowned me. My mother cried, but they were tears of social embarrassment, not loss. I left with 2 suitcases and the clothes on my back. Grandma Eleanor sent a driver. She didn't say, "I told you so." She handed me an envelope at the car. Inside was a key to a safe deposit box in Boston and a note. "For emergencies only. And remember, the most powerful structures are often invisible." For 4 years, I worked 3 jobs, studied until my vision blurred, and built a life on my own terms. I called home once a month. The conversations lasted 2 minutes. "Yes, I'm fine. No, I'm not coming home." Lucas would sometimes text, usually to ask if I'd come to my senses. Grandma Eleanor and I wrote actual letters on paper. She never mentioned money. She asked about load-bearing calculations, material science, the philosophy of design. She was the only family I had. Then 3 years ago, she was diagnosed with rapid-onset Alzheimer's. The family closed ranks. My parents moved her from Newport to a managed facility near them in Greenwich. They said it was for the best. They controlled all access. When I flew back to see her, they barred me from the facility. "You'll only agitate her," my father said. "She doesn't remember you anyway." That was a lie. Mr. Aldridge, her lawyer, contacted me secretly. He arranged one last visit. I saw her in a sterile visiting room. She was frail, her famous sharpness softened by the disease. But when the attendant stepped away, she gripped my hand with surprising strength. Her eyes locked on mine. "The keystone," she whispered, her voice rough. "You are the keystone, remember the box, the letter will find you." I didn't understand. 2 weeks later, she was gone. The funeral was a society event. I was seated in the back row, behind cousins I barely knew. My father gave a eulogy about legacy and continuity. He and my mother and Lucas stood at the head of the receiving line, the public face of the Vance family. I was introduced, if at all, as Eleanor's granddaughter from out of town. The will reading was a formality. The bulk of the known estate, the Newport house, the art, a $30 million liquid trust, went to my father. Lucas got a portfolio of commercial properties. I was left a single item, her first edition of Jane Austen's Persuasion. My father smirked. My mother looked relieved. It was a symbolic slap, a final confirmation of my irrelevance, or so they thought. What they didn't know, what no one in that room knew except Mr. Aldridge and a judge in South Dakota, was that the Vance fortune wasn't in the houses or the stocks. It was in a layered network of holding companies and silent trusts, a structure Grandma Eleanor had spent 50 years building. The legal entity known as Vance Consolidated Holdings didn't own things. It owned the companies that owned the companies that owned the assets, real estate in Singapore, mineral rights in Australia, a patent portfolio for green energy technology. Its value was estimated at $470 million. And according to the irrevocable trust document signed and notarized 1 week before her diagnosis, its sole trustee, the only person with the legal power to control it, was me. The letter I found on the porch that Christmas Eve was not part of the will. It was a personal dispatch, the final move in a game she'd been playing for my entire life. It explained everything. The secret summer lessons were trustee training. The game of reading trust documents was my preparation. The safe deposit key in Boston held the original documents and a set of encrypted digital keys. "I chose you," she wrote, "because you understand structures. Not just of steel and concrete, but of power and loyalty. They see wealth as a spotlight. You and I know it is a foundation. Use it to build something they can never imagine." I sat in my cold car that night, the heater blasting, the letter in my lap. I had the power to freeze the assets, to cut off the generous management fees my father paid himself, to redirect the dividends that funded my brother's lifestyle. I held the keystone to the entire Vance arch, and the family celebrating inside had no idea the ground had just shifted beneath their feet. I had until 9 a.m. the next morning, when Mr. Aldridge would formally file the notice of trustee succession with the state of South Dakota. Once that happened, there would be no going back. The Hidden Kingdom would have a new queen, and the king inside wouldn't even know he'd been dethroned. But here's what I didn't know, what Grandma Eleanor's letter couldn't prepare me for. My father wasn't just a proud man, he was a desperate one. His empire was a facade, leveraged to the hilt, and the only thing propping it up was the steady, silent cash flow from the holding company he believed he controlled. When I made my choice that night, I wasn't just claiming an inheritance. I was pulling the one support beam out from under a house of cards. And I was about to find out just how violently it could collapse. I called Mr. Aldridge from a 24-hour diner at 4 in the morning. His voice was alert, as if he'd been waiting. "Execute the succession," I said. There was a pause on the line, then a single, professional word. "Understood." By the time the sun rose, I was no longer just Alara Vance, the disowned daughter. I was the controlling trustee of Vance Consolidated Holdings. And the first transfer I blocked was the $500,000 monthly management fee my father had been paying himself for a decade. The silence lasted 3 days. On the morning of the 4th day, my phone exploded. It started with a text from my brother Lucas. "What the hell have you done?" Then another. "Call Dad, now." Then my mother. "Alara, sweetheart, there must be some terrible misunderstanding. Please call us so we can fix this." I didn't answer. I was in a secure conference room in Boston with Mr. Aldridge and a forensic accountant named Simone, who Grandma Aliner had pre-vetted years ago. We were mapping the true financial architecture for the first time. The picture was staggering. The holding company was a masterpiece of obfuscation and tax efficiency. Its assets were held through a chain of 12 limited liability companies across 3 countries, all ultimately owned by a South Dakota dynasty trust where I was now the sole fiduciary. The cash flow was immense, but Simone pointed a manicured finger at a series of outgoing wires. "These are the problem," she said. For the past 8 years, over 70% of the distributable income had been funneled into a single entity, Vance Realty Ventures, my father's firm. "It's a life support system," Simone said flatly. "Without this cash, his company has been insolvent since 2014. He's been using trust dividends to cover operating losses, service debt, and fund his lifestyle. Look." She showed me bank statements. The management fees paid for the Greenwich House mortgage, my mother's charity galas, Lucas's apartment. The holding company wasn't just an investment vehicle. It was the family's secret financial lung, and I had just clamped the oxygen tube. My father's call came at 5 p.m. I let it go to voicemail. He didn't yell. His voice was a controlled, venomous calm. "Alara, this childish stunt ends now. You have no idea what you're playing with. You will meet me and my attorneys at the offices of Clayton and Stern tomorrow at 10 a.m. to sign the trusteeship back to its proper stewards. If you do not, I will have you declared mentally incompetent and have you removed. Do not test me." I played it for Mr. Aldridge. He didn't flinch. "The trust document is ironclad," he said. "Your grandmother anticipated a challenge. She had you undergo a full psychological and financial competency evaluation 6 months before her diagnosis. The reports are sealed with the court. He can't touch you on those grounds." But my father didn't know how to lose. His next move wasn't legal, it was personal. That evening, a story appeared in the financial gossip section of a New York tabloid. "Outcast heiress Hijacks family fortune." It painted me as an unstable, vengeful daughter who'd exploited a sick old woman's fatting mind to steal from my hardworking family. It mentioned my failed engineering ambitions and my estrangement. Lucas was quoted, calling it a tragic misunderstanding. My father wasn't quoted, but his fingerprints were all over it. The goal was clear: shame me into surrender or poison my reputation so deeply that no court would see me as a fit trustee. I stared at the article on my laptop, a cold fury settling in my chest. This was their language, appearances, reputation, social ammunition. They thought this was a battle fought in country club whispers and newspaper columns. They didn't understand that Grandma Aliner had taught me to fight in the bedrock, in the realm of law and structure. Mr. Aldridge placed a gentle hand on the conference table. "We can sue for defamation," he said. I shook my head. "No, we don't fight the story. We change the facts underneath it." I gave Simone and her team a new directive. Follow the money from Vance Realty Ventures. Every dollar that came from the trust. I want to know where it really went. What they found in 48 hours was the pivot, the moment the family drama became a financial crime scene. The trust money hadn't just covered losses. It had been used to inflate property values in a massive Ponzi-like scheme. My father had been using the steady, clean cash from the trust to create phantom equity in his failing real estate projects, then borrowing against that inflated value from a network of private lenders. He wasn't just propping up a business. He was using the holding company's assets as collateral for loans he could never repay. And the quarterly financial statements he'd been submitting to the trust's oversight committee, a committee he chaired, were outright forgeries. Simone laid the evidence before me: forged audit reports, doctored bank statements, a web of circular transactions designed to fool even a diligent trustee. Grandma Aliner had been the diligent trustee. She must have suspected. That's why she moved when she did. My father wasn't just a proud man facing ruin. He was a fraudster facing prison. And my control of the trust wasn't just an inconvenience, it was an existential threat. He wouldn't try to have me declared incompetent. He would need to destroy me. The confrontation happened not in a lawyer's office, but in the lobby of my apartment building. I was coming home from a late meeting. He stepped out from behind a pillar, looking older than he had at the funeral, his expensive coat seeming too big for him. "We need to talk," he said, dispensing with any greeting. I kept walking toward the elevators. "We have nothing to talk about, Richard." The use of his first name made him flinch. He grabbed my arm. "You will listen to me." I stopped, looked down at his hand, then back at his face. Remove your hand, or I will have you charged with assault, and the security footage will be provided to the financial press along with Simon's report on the forged audit statements. His hand dropped as if burned. The color drained from his face. He knew I had the evidence. You have no idea what you're unleashing, he hissed, keeping his voice low. If you cut off the cash, the lenders call the loans. The company collapses. Not just my company, Alara, the pensions of 50 employees, the investments of families who trusted me, your brother's future, your mother's life. Is that what you want, to burn it all down for revenge? I felt the old hook of guilt, sharp and familiar. He was a master at framing his survival as a moral imperative for everyone else. I met his gaze. You built a house on a foundation of fraud, using someone else's money. I didn't light the match. I turned off the gasoline you were using to hide the fire. What happens next is the direct result of your choices, not mine. I stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, I saw his expression shift from fury to something far worse, pure, unadulterated fear. The next morning, the first domino fell. A private equity firm in Chicago, one of the lenders, called the loan on a flagship office building my father had used as collateral. He couldn't pay. The news hit the real estate wires by noon. Vance Realty Ventures in technical default. My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was my mother calling from a friend's phone since I'd blocked hers. She was sobbing. He's locked himself in his study. He won't come out. The bank is calling. People are showing up at the house. Alara, please, you have to help. You have to give him back control. I felt a pang, but it was distant, like hearing a storm from inside a strong building. I can't do that, Mother. The trust's duty is to preserve the assets for future beneficiaries. Pouring more money into his fraud would be a breach of my legal duty. I could go to jail. There was a long silence. Then she whispered the words that revealed the true family calculus. But what about us? What about your family? I took a breath. You should get your own lawyer, Mom. Today, I hung up. The storm was now public. The financial press connected the dots between the holding company succession and my father's default. The narrative began to shift. The outcast heiress was now being described as a whistleblower trustee, uncovering potential malfeasance. Reporters dug into Vance Realty's books. My father's prestigious facade cracked open for the world to see. But in the chaos, I made a fatal assumption. I assumed the fight would stay in the world of finance and law. I assumed my brother Lucas was just a spoiled bystander. I was wrong. Lucas wasn't our father. He was worse. He was our father without the charm and with a lot more to lose. And while I was watching the financial front, he was opening a second, much more dangerous flank, targeting the one thing I had built entirely on my own. My engineering firm was called Keystone Design. I'd built it from my MIT thesis, a boutique studio specializing in sustainable public infrastructure. We just won the contract to design a new pedestrian bridge for a city park in Hartford. It was my proudest achievement, completely separate from the Vance name and money, until Lucas made it his primary target. It started with an anonymous complaint to the state licensing board, alleging professional negligence on an old project. Then a series of one-star reviews appeared online, all from newly created accounts, claiming shoddy work and unethical practices. My office manager, Chloe, was in tears fielding calls from confused clients. I knew it was Lucas. The timing was too perfect, the method too petty. He was using his father's playbook, attack reputation, but with the blunt force of a social media troll. I had my lawyer send a cease and desist. It was ignored. Then, the Hartford city councilor who'd championed our bridge project called me. His voice was strained. Alara, I've just had a very disturbing meeting with a lawyer representing a concurred citizens group. They're alleging you secured the contract through familial connections and that your firm is financially unstable due to, quote, ongoing inheritance litigation. They're demanding the contract be suspended pending an investigation. My blood ran cold. Lucas wasn't just trying to annoy me, he was trying to destroy the one thing that proved I didn't need them. I confronted him over email. His reply was a masterpiece of plausible deniability. I have no idea what you're talking about, Alara. I'm focused on trying to save our family from the disaster you've created. Perhaps your paranoia is affecting your business judgment. I showed the email to Mr. Aldridge. For the first time, he looked worried. Your brother is more sophisticated than your father, he said. He's creating a narrative of your instability. If he can get the bridge contract revoked, it becomes a factual point he can use in the trust litigation. He can argue you're not a responsible fiduciary. I had to fight a war on two fronts. in the courthouse to defend the trusteeship, and in the court of public opinion to save my company. I made a decision. I would go public, not with a tabloid but with a carefully curated data dump. Simone and I prepared a public summary, stripped of legalese, showing how the trust's assets had been misappropriated. We didn't name my father directly, but the numbers told the story. We released it on a business transparency forum. The reaction was swift and brutal, but not toward me. Financial analysts and journalists dissected the figures. The story evolved from family drama to potential fiduciary fraud. The pressure shifted. Now my father's lenders were asking harder questions. The district attorney's office opened a preliminary inquiry. Lucas's response was immediate and nuclear. He didn't go after me again. He went after Chloe. He hired a private investigator who dug up her brother's old drug conviction. Then he anonymously tipped off a reporter that Keystone Design's office manager was closely associated with a convicted felon, implying we were laundering money. It was absurd, but it worked. Chloe, terrified of the spotlight and worried for her brother, resigned. She was my first friend, my first hire. Losing her felt like a physical wound. That night, sitting alone in my dark office, I understood. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about annihilation. Lucas would burn down everything I loved to force me to surrender the trust. But he made one critical mistake. In his zeal to find dirt on Chloe, his investigator had left a digital footprint. Simone's cybersecurity consultant traced a phishing email sent to Chloe back to a server registered to a shell company. And that shell company was linked to a private security firm that had once done work for Vance Realty Ventures. We had a direct, albeit complicated, paper trail leading back to my brother. It was evidence of a coordinated campaign of harassment and defamation. I took it to my lawyer. We can file a civil suit for tortious interference and intentional infliction of emotional distress, she said. It's a powerful lever. I shook my head. No, we don't sue. We invite him to a meeting. The meeting was my terms, my territory, a neutral law firm conference room in downtown Boston. I brought Mr. Aldridge and my lawyer. Lucas came alone, arrogant in his belief that he held the psychological advantage. He didn't sit. He stood, looking down at me. Ready to negotiate your surrender, I slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a screenshot of the server log, with the connection to the security firm highlighted. I know you hired the investigator who harassed Chloe. I have the full chain of evidence. You have 30 seconds to call off every fake review, every anonymous complaint, and retract your statement to the Hartford City Council. If you do, this stays between us. If you don't, I file a criminal complaint for cyber harassment and witness intimidation, and I give the full story to the same reporter you used. Your picture will be on page 6 next to the word bully. His smirk vanished. He picked up the paper, his eyes scanning it. I saw the same calculation I'd seen in my father's eyes, but colder. He was weighing the cost. You're bluffing, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I replied. You've seen what I've done with the trust. Do you really think I won't follow through? He was silent for a full minute. Then he took out his phone, made a call, and put it on speaker. He told his lawyer on the other end to withdraw all complaints against Keystone Design immediately. It was a small, concrete victory, but as he left, he turned at the door. This changes nothing, Alara. You might win a battle, but you've already lost the family. You're alone. The door clicked shut. Mr. Aldridge let out a long breath. That was dangerously bold, he said. I didn't feel bold. I felt exhausted, because part of me knew he was right. The financial collapse accelerated. Vance Realty Ventures filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection 2 weeks later. The Greenwich house was mortgaged to the hilt. My mother moved into a rented apartment. My father, facing a cascade of lawsuits and the looming DA investigation, became a ghost. But the holding company, under my stewardship, was stable. Simone and I began the work of restructuring, disentangling its assets from my father's toxic debt. It was complex, dry work. And in the quiet of that financial triage, I found the third revelation, the one that changed the meaning of everything. Simone was auditing a subsidiary that owned a portfolio of life science patents. The revenue here is odd, she said. It's too consistent. These patents are in very niche fields, but they're generating royalty payments like they're for consumer software. We dug deeper. The patents were owned by the holding company, but the exclusive licensing rights had been sold, for a shockingly low sum, to a private biotech firm called Ethelgard Sciences. I'd never heard of it. A corporate records search showed it was incorporated in Delaware, with a single director, Lucas Aaron Vance. My breath caught. Lucas hadn't just been a bystander or a foot soldier. He had been quietly looting the family fortune, too, in a different, more sophisticated way. While my father was clumsily siphoning cash, Lucas had convinced Grandma Aliner, early in her illness, to grant him exclusive licenses to the holding company's most valuable intellectual property for pennies on the dollar. He'd then sublicensed them to real companies for millions, pocketing the difference. He had seen the collapse coming and had built his own lifeboat, using the trust's assets as the raw materials. And he had done it by exploiting our grandmother's fatting mind. The betrayal was so deep, so coldly premeditated, it felt like the floor had dropped away. He hadn't just attacked my company out of spite. He was protecting his own stolen kingdom. His moralizing about saving the family was a cover. He was saving himself. I had the evidence, the licensing agreement, the sublicense contracts, the bank transfers. Confronting him with this wasn't about business leverage. It was about looking my own brother in the eye and showing him I knew he was a thief and a liar. But before I could decide what to do, the decision was made for me. A certified letter arrived at my office. It was from my father's attorney. Given the irreparable breakdown of familial relations and the hostile administration of the trust, my father and brother were petitioning the South Dakota court to remove me as trustee. Their grounds: that my personal animus was clouding my judgment and damaging the trust's relationship with its key business partner, Ethelgard Sciences. They were using Lucas's secret theft as a weapon against me. The hearing was set for 6 weeks away. The legal battle for the soul of the Vance fortune was now official, and it would be fought in a closed courtroom 1,000 miles from home. I had the evidence to crush them, but using it would mean publicly destroying my brother and likely sending my father to prison. It would be the final, absolute end of my family. Grandma Aliner's letter had said to build something they can never imagine. I always thought she meant a business, a legacy. Now, standing at the precipice of total war, I wondered if she meant something else entirely. I had the power to end the story as a scorched earth victor. But as I looked at the petition, at the cold legal language that formalized our mutual destruction, I heard her voice from all those summers past. The strongest bridge, she'd said, watching me sketch, is not the one that simply bears the load. It is the one that allows for movement, for tension, for the occasional tremor without collapsing. I had 6 weeks to decide what kind of structure I was going to build, a fortress or a bridge. And the first witness I needed to call wasn't a lawyer or an accountant. It was the one person who knew all the secrets and who had chosen silence for 26 years. My mother. I met my mother at a botanical garden cafe, a place with no family history. She arrived without her wedding ring, a detail I noticed immediately. She didn't hug me. She sat, ordered tea, and said, "I've been waiting for you to ask." For the next hour, she told me everything she'd seen and chosen not to see. She knew about my father's financial troubles 5 years ago. She knew he was taking more from the trust than he should. She asked once, and he told her it was temporary, that he'd fix it. She believed him because the alternative, that her entire life was a facade, was too terrifying to contemplate. She suspected Lucas was manipulating Grandma Aliner during her early decline. She walked in on him once, guiding her hand to sign a document. When she questioned him, he told her she was imagining things, that stress was making her paranoid. She chose to believe him too. "I built my life on being the beautiful, supportive wife," she said, her voice hollow. "My job was to smooth edges, not examine cracks. By the time I realized the cracks were canyons, it was too late. I was in the canyon with them." Then she told me something that changed the entire axis of the story. "Your grandmother came to me 6 months before she was diagnosed. She knew what was happening. She told me about the trust succession plan, about you. She asked me to be ready to support you when the time came." My mother looked down at her hands. "I told her I couldn't. I told her it would destroy Richard." She looked at me with such pity. She said, "Celeste, he is already destroyed. I am trying to save what's left." I didn't listen. I was a coward. The confession hung in the air between us, heavy and sad. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was stating a fact. Her cowardice had been her cage. "What do you want now?" I asked. She looked at me, her eyes clear for the first time. "I want to help you, however you'll let me. I've filed for legal separation. I've hired my own lawyer. I am prepared to testify if you need me to about what I saw Lucas do, about what I know Richard did." It was the bravest thing I'd ever heard her say. It was also, legally, a grenade. Her testimony could sink them both. I didn't say yes or no. I told her I needed to think. But I left that meeting with a new, painful understanding. The bridge I was trying to build might only have one pillar: me. The South Dakota hearing was a stark procedural affair. The courtroom was modern, quiet, and cold. My father and Lucas sat with their attorneys on the opposite side. My father looked diminished, his expensive suit hanging loose. Lucas looked confident, arrogant. He believed his legal maneuvering and the narrative of my hostility would win the day. Mr. Aldridge represented the trust. I sat at the petitioner's table, Simon's files stacked neatly before me. Their lawyer argued passionately that my actions were vindictive, that I had frozen legitimate business with Ethelgard Sciences out of spite, harming the trust's value. He painted me as an inexperienced engineer playing with financial instruments she didn't understand. When it was our turn, Mr. Aldridge was methodical. He entered the trust document, the competency reports, the financial records showing the siphoning of funds. Then he nodded to me. It was my turn. I didn't attack, I explained. I walked the judge, a serious woman in her 60s, through the structure of the holding company like it was an engineering schematic. I showed her the cash flow diagrams, the point where the diversions began. I explained my fiduciary duty to preserve the corpus of the trust. I was calm, precise, and factual. Then, I addressed the Ethelgard issue. I placed the licensing agreement on the overhead projector. I showed the judge the paltry sum paid for exclusive rights to patents worth millions. I showed the subsequent sublicensing deals Lucas had made. I didn't accuse him of theft. I simply laid out the economic reality. This is not a sound business partnership for the trust, I said. It is a transfer of value from the beneficiaries to my brother. As trustee, I cannot allow it to continue. Lucas's lawyer objected, but the judge was looking at the numbers, her brow furrowed. She called for a recess. In the hallway, Lucas cornered me. You ruin everything, he spat. There will be nothing left for anyone. I looked at him, my brother, the stranger. You did that when you decided to steal from your grandmother, I said quietly. I'm just turning on the lights. When we reconvened, the judge delivered her ruling from the bench. She denied the petition to remove me as trustee. She found my administration to be prudent, professional, and in strict adherence to the fiduciary duties outlined in the trust instrument. Then she turned her gaze to my father and brother. However, the evidence presented regarding the licensing agreements with Ethelgard Sciences is concerning. The court will appoint a special master to review all related party transactions from the past 5 years. All licensing payments are to be held in escrow pending that review. It was a victory, but a qualified one. The war wasn't over, but I had held the high ground. Outside the courthouse, my father approached me. The fury was gone, replaced by a hollow defeat. You've won, he said. What do you want? I had rehearsed this moment 100 times. I wanted apologies. I wanted remorse. Standing there, I realized I wanted none of those things from him. They would be just more words. I want you to cooperate with the special master, I said. I want you to provide a full accounting of every dollar taken from the trust. In return, I will not pursue criminal referrals for the forgery. You will be civilly liable, but you will stay out of prison. He stared at me, shocked. Why? He finally asked. I thought of my grandmother's bridge. Because collapse helps no one, but neither does pretending the foundation is solid. We rebuild with the truth or not at all. The aftermath was a long, unglamorous slog of financial reconstruction. The special master's investigation confirmed the scale of the diversion. My father was forced into personal bankruptcy. The Greenwich house was sold. Lucas was ordered to repay millions to the trust from the Ethelgard profits, wiping him out. The holding company's assets were finally clean, disentangled from their debts. With Simon's help, I established a new governance structure, a professional board of directors, with me as chair of the trustee committee. The Vance fortune would no longer be a private piggy bank. It would be an engine for the kind of investment Grandma Aliner believed in: sustainable infrastructure, green technology, affordable housing. My mother moved to a small apartment in Boston. We have dinner every other week. It's awkward, but it's honest. She's in therapy. She's learning who she is without the title of Mrs. Richard Vance. We are building, brick by tentative brick, a new relationship. It will never be the mother-daughter story I dreamed of as a child. It's something more real, two adults who share a painful history, choosing to move forward with clear eyes. Lucas left the country. He works for a venture capital firm in Singapore. We do not speak. The bridge contract in Hartford was reinstated. Keystone Design is now overseeing its construction. The project is fully funded by a grant from a new philanthropic foundation I created with a portion of the trust's dividends. Its name is the Aliner Vance Foundation. And here is the final detail, the one I discovered only when the legal dust had settled. When Mr. Aldridge closed the estate files, he gave me a small, locked metal box that had been in my grandmother's safety deposit box. Inside, beneath some old jewelry, was a sealed envelope with my name on it. It was a second letter, dated the same day as the one I'd received on the porch. This one was shorter. "My dearest Alara," it began. "If you are reading this, it means you chose the harder path. You chose to build, not just to win. The trust was never the true inheritance. The inheritance was the strength to see things as they are and the courage to build something better upon that truth. I saw that strength in you when you were 6 years old, furious about a doll. Use the money to make bridges, literal and figurative. And remember, the most important structure you will ever build is your own character. It is the only one no one can ever take from you. With all my love, Grandma." I keep that letter in my desk drawer at Keystone. On difficult days, I read it. She was right. The money, the power, the victory in court, they were just tools. The real inheritance was the unshakable knowledge she gave me, that I was seen, I was chosen, and I was capable of building a life that could weather any storm. The Vance family, as it was, is gone. But from its ruins, something new is being built, something with a stronger foundation, and I am its architect. So, what is the moral of this story? It's not that money fixes everything. It's that truth, however painful, is the only foundation strong enough to build a future on. My grandmother didn't rescue me with a fortune. She handed me a mirror and a set of blueprints, and forced me to decide what I would reflect and what I would build. For anyone listening who feels unseen in their own family, who has been cast as the background character in someone else's story, I want you to hear this. Your value is not determined by their applause. Your legacy is not limited by their imagination. The world is full of invisible structures, of power, of money, of love, waiting for someone with clear eyes to see them and steady hands to reshape them. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is not forgiveness, but accountability. Not blind loyalty, but principled distance. The Vance Family Holding Company now funds scholarships for women in engineering. It invests in resilient public infrastructure. The wealth is no longer hidden, it is put to work. That is the bridge I chose to build. It doesn't erase the past. It doesn't magically reunite us for holidays. But it creates a path forward, one that can bear the weight of our history without collapsing under it. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been left out in the cold by the people who were supposed to love you, I want you to know this. The warmth you're waiting for might not come from behind that locked door. It might come from the fire you learned to build yourself. Gather your own materials, draw your own plans, and build something so solid, so true, that if they ever do turn around, they won't see a victim shivering on their porch. They'll see an architect, standing before a creation they could never have imagined. Thank you for listening to my story. If you want to hear more stories about hidden legacies, family secrets, and the courage to rebuild, make sure to subscribe. Tell me in the comments, what would you have built? I'll see you next time.